So this is a pretty universal struggle when learning guitar. You are able to learn the chord shapes quite easily, but when it comes to the point of transitioning and switching between the chords, you realize that that is sort of 80 or 90% of the struggle. That can be a very big barrier for quitting with a lot of players. It is a very frustrating portion of sort of your guitar journey. I haven't met a single beginning student, and I haven't taught a single beginner student who is able to just execute those things flawlessly off the get-go. It is something that we have to work through. So I'll show you some practical tips and tricks of how you can get doing that, or how you can get to doing that a lot simpler and a lot easier. So let's talk about why something like this is difficult first. So first you need to realize that this is completely new muscle memory. It isn't something that you do in any other thing that you've done in life. And what I like to say to my students is, if you think about our history as humans, I really would like you to try to find something that we used to do where we would play a C chord shape, and then an E chord shape, and then an A minor chord shape. So it's a very new kind of thing for the body to do. Another thing that makes it very difficult is that each finger needs to go to a new place at the same time. So you got to have kind of a little bit of dexterity with each finger and a little bit of finger independence. So your brain's got to be able to think about each finger as an individual item and be able to move those around. And that's difficult, especially when you're starting out. You haven't exactly built up the dexterity quite yet, and that makes it very frustrating to learn how to switch between chords. A common error that I do see, touching on that, something that's quite a common mistake that beginners do make, is that they'll try to move all of their fingers at once at full speed. Now, you'll see that a lot of practiced guitarists and seasoned guitarists do actually do that, but that is because we've built up that kind of muscle memory. You need to realize that for now, you're kind of exploring a map to a degree, right? So if you think about going to a big mall for the first time you're there, you have no idea where you're going. You'll walk around, you'll stumble upon the grocery store, then you'll stumble upon a body wash store, you'll stumble upon the technology store, things like that. And then the 50th time that you go, you have way more of an idea of where you're going to. So you think to yourself before going that, I want to go to the tech store, I want to go to the hairdresser, and I want to go to a coffee shop. So you kind of map that route out in your head and you're able to get there quickly. Now, the 200th time that you go, you know that mall so well that you don't really even need to think ahead about where you're going. You just know where every single store is. So that's kind of how chord changes work as well, is that the first few times we do them, they're really difficult and we don't know where we're going. We have to think about what we're doing. Then after quite a bit of practice, we get to a point where we can just plan the chords ahead. So if I'm playing an A minor chord, I already know what's going to happen to get to the C chord. And then you get to a point of practice where you don't even have to think about those things. I could read the chords in front of me and I could just go straight from chord to chord to chord and make that work without any planning. So the main thing that you got to do when you're starting your practice on chords is going to be to slow down. Absolutely slow down. There's no shame in going from an A minor chord like this to a G chord, building your fingers all together like that. There's no problem with that. Right now you're learning the map. So a couple of tricks that you can do that make chord changes way easier is to focus on what we call anchor fingers. So for example, if I'm playing an A minor chord and I need to go to a C major chord, all I'm doing is I'm lifting my ring finger and then placing it back down. Now, my middle finger and my index finger have stayed in exactly the same position, so those are anchor fingers. Rather than playing the A minor chord like that, and then lifting my hand and placing a C major chord back down, that's going to make it way more difficult. And in terms of economy of motion, which is like how little movement we can do for how much, or the maximum reward, you got to realize that keeping your fingers in one spot is a really good way to sort of maximize that potential. And then another thing that really, really helps is to sit and really identify which chords have anchor fingers and where they are. So you get things that are called full anchors, and that is going to be A minor to C, for example, and you get what we call half anchors. So if you're thinking about a D major chord to an E major chord, you can see that my index finger is a half anchor, so it stays on the same string, it's just moving back a fret to get to the different chords. So back a fret to get to E, forward to get to D. The first exercise that you really should be focusing on with chord changes is going to just be alternating between chords. I would recommend maybe don't even play them with your right hand. Just sort of learn the map. So say to yourself, that's a D chord. Take it off, place a G chord down. That's a G chord. Take it off, place it down again as a D chord, and say to yourself, that is a D chord. And so you slowly start to learn how to map chords out on the fretboard. Further practice that you can do that's really, really useful is to use what we call a chord clock. So I've built a tool that I'll show you at the end of this video on how to use the chord clock, and briefly just explaining the chord clock is it's essentially placing one chord in the middle and writing various chords around it. So what you would do is you'd go from the middle chord to an outlying chord, from the outlying chord back to the middle chord, from that same middle chord to the next outlying chord back, and you'll just go in a clockwise fashion like that. So you could use that to train chords, and I have seen exercises like those work the best for players because you're identifying which chords are difficult and you are able to put a lot of focus into them while still practicing transitions to the other chords. So practice like that, I guarantee you'll feel the difference in one session if you're focusing on a particular chord, and if you're able to do that every day consistently, you'll see massive improvements in a week or 2 weeks. And in the next video, what we'll talk about is just if your chords are buzzing, if you're getting very strange buzzing noises in your chords, how to clear those up, why they happen. And if you need any other advice, do check the beginner guitar playlist. I'm going to quickly show you that chord clock. There we go. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you in the next one.